Prestige. I've been waiting for us to do this one.
I like that this worked out the way it did. We wanted to do Chris Nolan because of Batman coming out, just because it was timely. And the way that Batman was released was going to just fall right in the middle of our Christopher Nolan schedule. So we were just like, we'll just kind of do them in whatever order we want. And we ended up pushing The Prestige and Inception until after Batman, and I think that was the right decision.
I think so too. So we got to watch like his early work,
Mm-hmm.
and then all his big, the big movies that everyone knows about, Batman movies, and now we get to watch his. These are probably my two favorite of his movies, I would say. This and Inception. So the work that he got to do after he became kind of a famous director-writer duo with his brother.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that this was based on a book or a short story, but I'd never really investigated, and apparently they've accomplished a little bit more than, or Shawn thinks that they've accomplished a little bit more with this movie than the actual original source material, which is cool.
Well, yeah, to be fair, I'd only read the synopsis on Wikipedia, but it sounds like they followed the same general story, but it was a epistolary, which means it's in letter written form. So in the movie, you get the sense that you're hearing the story from a journal, at least for a lot of it.
Yeah.
But basically, the book was completely like that, and then also the ending of the book was a lot more, I would say, like wishy-washy. I think the end of this film is very, very precise. It's like clockwork coming together, and it fits perfectly.
Yeah, everything snaps together at the end in a way that's a lot more satisfying than in like the complex storylines of the last two Batman movies. That when Batman Begins didn't have a really complex story. I thought that those, they were good movies, and they had complex, interweaving plots, especially this last one. But it was not like, I did not feel a satisfying click when Talia al Ghul got revealed,
Right. You were just that's why I didn't like her.
I was like, oh, geez, it's her, yeah. Or even the end, like, Bruce Wayne is still alive. I did not find that as satisfying as the end of The Prestige.
So from here on out, spoilers beware. If you do not want to know about The Prestige, we're going to pretty much from the beginning spoil stuff because you just need to talk about this movie.
Yeah, so if you have any interest in seeing this, you probably should turn this off right now.
We highly encourage you to watch this film.
You should watch it before you listen to us. Like, what was I thinking about? It was another Nolan movie. Memento. I think it's probably fine to listen to us before you watch that.
It won't matter as much.
No. But this one you're going to want to see it because the first time you see it, unless you're, very clairvoyant when it comes to movies like this, you probably won't know all of the things that are happening. There'll probably be at least one thing that you're like, I didn't even think about that, or I didn't even realize that. Like, you might be smart and guess like, ooh, I called that, and ooh, I called that. But there'll be at least one thing for everybody who are like, oh, look at that. And you'll wish that you had, been able to be on the roller coaster for yourself.
I said I was going to mention Usual Suspects.
Yes.
This is like the Usual Suspects in that you can only watch it for the first time once.
Yep.
Because once you know that one thing, you can never watch it the same way again.
Exactly. Like this time when I was watching it, everything I was thinking about was like, ooh, yeah.
Everything is different. So let's get to spoiling it. Get out if you're still here.
Get out! Get off my lawn. So there are two main characters played by there's Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman. And Christian Bale, they're both magicians, and Christian Bale, we find out at the end, is actually he plays two characters. He plays twin brothers. That's the big spoiler at the end.
That's the biggest spoiler of them all.
That's the biggest spoiler of them all. That's yeah, I would say that. That's the biggest thing that, you could be spoiled on.
So for the sake of our discussion, we'll refer to Brother 1, who is with the wife and child, as Alfred, and Brother 2, who is in love with Scarlett Johansson's character, as Freddy, because that's what she calls him.
Yes, I'm not always at home.
You're gonna affect your Christian Bale. I'll start throwing out my Michael Caine if you start doing that.
All right, all right. So that I think rounds out the principal cast: Christian Bale, Hugh Jackman, Scarlett Johansson, uh, uh, Michael Caine, and uh, David Bowie for some reason.
Occasionally, David Bowie.
And for some reason, David Bowie and the guy who played Smeagol. Gollum.
Yeah, Andy Serkis plays
Andy Serkis.
David Bowie's, aka Tesla's little minion.
Yeah. So this is a movie about sort of like a war between magicians, as best as I could possibly describe it. Right? It starts out small, but it then the consequences become huge.
Yeah.
Like, dire.
Yeah. I said to Alicia as we were watching it, if Ayn Rand had written a book about magicians, this might be it.
Yeah, maybe, maybe.
It's just these men focused on this ultimate goal of perfection.
Yeah, I mean, they both want to be the best magicians ever, and they also war one against the other.
They will sacrifice so much to do this.
It reminds me sort of like Clive Barker kind of stories, not like because of demons or over sexualization, but just like the will. A lot of his books and stories are about will, like the will that these two men exert over the world is pretty remarkable. The things that they can achieve, and I think that's pretty amazing because both of the characters, whether you fall on one side or the other, and I think I know what side I fall on. I don't know if it's the same for you. Whatever side you fall on, by the end of this movie, like you've seen like something pretty remarkable from both of these men, or both of these characters. Even if you're like me and you didn't much care for Hugh Jackman, and you were glad that Christian Bale sort of won at the end.
I'm on Cutter's side.
Okay, fine. That's
okay. Cutter saw through everyone's illusion instantly.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing is so the backstory on how this like war got started is that Hugh Jackman, Freddie and Alfred. And one thing we haven't mentioned is that when one of them is playing that magician person. The other gets in like a fat suit with like mutton chops and plays this mute character called Fallon.
Yeah,
which is kind of like follows Alfred around and it's like kind of creepy.
He's to explain it to the people in his life, he's like a guy who helps him with his tricks and stuff.
He's his engineer,
right?
Yeah. So they are sort of novice apprentice magicians to this kind of like sort of middle of the road act that Cutter is the engineer on, and they're sort of plying their trade and practicing and trying to come up with good illusions, and in the course of working with this magician, they do a very risky stunt with Hugh Jackman's wife. And she drowns in it's sort of like a Houdini kind of thing. She gets tied up and put into a box with water in it, and she has to get out. And for what I don't, no one knows, but Hugh Jackman believes that.
Would you call him Angier, please?
Angier, I can't. Angier believes.
Wolverine believes.
Wolverine believes that Alfred tied a knot that was too tight, basically, or tied a knot that it's way more difficult to get out of. It looks more realistic, but it's like way much more difficult to get out of. And Alfred confesses that he doesn't remember what kind of knot he tied, but
see, this is one of those moments on the rewatch that when he's confronted by Angier and he's like, which knot did you tie? And Borden is just like, I don't know. I'm wondering if that Borden actually does know, because that might not be the same guy.
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. It might not be the same guy. So he might not know. regardless, Angier's wife is dead, and they both go out, you know, trying to be magicians. And yeah, he confronts Borden, and he shoots two of his fingers off. He's doing a bullet catch.
Yeah.
Which is, very dangerous, and he expresses, Borden expresses that to Sarah. His, I don't think they were married at the time, but his love interest. That it draws a crowd, and one of the things that's really cool about these two characters is that they're so in each other's heads. They like think out like 3 steps. I'm thinking specifically with the diaries. But Angier just knows, like, Borden's doing bullet catches. I can get into the crowd and I can like cause him to suffer, and that's what he does. And then his minor obsession is revenge over from Borden.
Right.
But his major obsession becomes Borden's magic trick.
Right. Borden reveals a trick that he calls the transported man. That they do something really mean to you, and they don't show it in the movie for a really long time.
Yeah.
They continue talking about it, and they don't actually show you what the damn trick is.
Well, Angier says it's the greatest magic trick he's ever seen in his life. And we're like, what is it?
What is it? How do I... And since you've already seen it, dear listener, it's he walks through one door after bouncing a little rubber ball, and a door on the opposite side of the stage opens, and he walks out and grabs the ball.
Yeah, it's about separated by like 20 feet.
And it happens in a second.
Yeah, he bounces the ball so it's going across the stage, closes the door, opens the door, there he is. Boom.
And Cutter says he's using a double.
And Angier is insistent that, no, it can't be a double.
It's him. It's the same man who went in the box.
Yes, he believes that it's the same man. And this is this eventually becomes one of the coolest things about this movie for me, is that, he's using a double.
He is using a double.
But Angier is so single-mindedly driven to producing a magic trick that is the transported man, but without a double, that through his will alone, he actually does it.
Right.
Like, Borden didn't come up with... I mean, Borden sees through his version of the transported man immediately, and actually that leads to, a lot of trouble and hardship for Angier. But eventually, by the end of the movie, he comes up with his own perfect version of the transported man. He calls it the real transported man. And that was because of his own, insanity, his own obsession with Borden and his magic trick.
With a little help from a wizard.
Right. I mean, if he had just listened to Cutter, And he did, basically. Like, Cutter came up with a trick. I mean, that speaks entirely to Cutter's like prowess as an engineer. He came up with a trick that
it worked,
and also is a lot cooler than Borden's trick, because Borden has no showmanship.
Right.
I think it's pretty cool, even though exactly what's going on. Angier's version of it is, well, like, what's so cool about his is that Borden's version it's like cupboards that he steps into, and then they open up the first cupboard so you can see that there's no one in there. Angier's, did I mix those guys up already? Angier's version is just 2 doors, like on the stage. Frames, yeah. And it's got this like little mechanism that they've developed to, like, he can fall and another guy gets shoved up in the air. It's pretty cool. It's no real transported man, obviously.
But it works. The only problem with it, and Angier can't deal with it, is the fact that he is below the stage for the end of the show.
Yeah, it's tragic. He bows. It's so sad. So sad. And, Borden realizes that right away. And so we are experiencing this story through... It's Borden reading Angier's journal, and most of the story is Angier reading Borden's journal. Right? He's Borden wrote an encrypted journal that also supposedly has his method for doing the transported man in it, and Angier acquires that through Scarlett Johansson. What does she have a name? What's her name?
Olivia.
He acquires that through Olivia and her machinations and scheming.
also against him, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah, she was in love with him, and he treated her like, yeah,
A
like
whore?
a whore. Yeah, go to Borden, uh, and get me what I want.
I remember seeing this for the first time when she just went, and I was like, "What the hell? Like, come on, woman!" And then it turned out that they had cut the scene, like they didn't actually show you the rest, and I was like, "Okay, never mind."
Yeah, Angier instructs her to be like, he's gonna expect this, but you tell him the truth of what's going on, and then eventually he'll come to trust you. And she's like, okay, and does it. And then we find out later that she's just pissed. Like, she was in love with Angier, and that, the way that he treated her, she really does want to screw him now.
Yeah, so she totally buys in, and she falls in love with the one version of... falls in love with Freddie, who is not the guy who's in love with Sarah.
Right. So, and also one thing that we left out is, so far, is Borden is reading Angier's journal while waiting for his execution for the murder of Angier.
Which they basically show us in the first 5 minutes of the film.
Yeah, he drowns.
They set you up with the expectation that Angier is dead.
Yeah, Angier is dead, and he drowned.
So the whole movie you go through with the expectation that it's all going to come to a murder.
Exactly.
And you just believe the whole time that Angier at the end of this war ends up dead.
Yes. So Scarlett Johansson, Olivia, helps Freddie and Alfred get some showmanship, and this is the part of the war where it has escalated so far that I was like, whoa, I can't believe what's happening right now. So Borden finds the double that Angier's been using, and he bribes him, puts thoughts in his head, whatever.
Also, you realize that guy was Hugh Jackman, right?
Yes.
He's so good at not seeming like himself.
He played a really good person who looks kind of like Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, they obviously put a little bit of prosthetics on his face, but then he also did this voice, and he kind of like carried himself different when he was supposed to be drunk. It was great.
Right. I loved that. Well, anyway, Angier is making it huge in London, and Borden opens up his act right across the street from him, and totally sabotages Angier. And by sabotage, I mean he puts him into a situation where he could have killed himself. Like, he could have snapped his neck.
Yeah.
Borden somehow, bribes the stagehand, I don't know, and removes the big mat, big pile of straw that Angier falls onto, and he breaks his leg. And he's left with a limp for the rest of his life.
He gets to walk with a cool pimp cane.
That's true. And Borden finishes the trick and comes out, and he's obviously learned some showmanship at this point, because he was like,
obviously that is Freddie.
Yeah, he's like, I own this sucker,
It gets a nice little laugh break from the audience who understands the in-joke.
Yes.
They're like, oh, the other guy with the transported man. I get it.
Yeah.
They probably just think it's part of the show.
Right. So it's at this point, Angier's ruined, he can't do this trick anymore. Once again, if he had listened to Cutter, he wouldn't have been in this situation. Because the double has started making demands, and Cutter's like, we got to stop this trick now.
Yeah, he pulled the plug.
Can't do tricks that you're not in charge of, that you can't control. And he was like, look, you just got a review that said you were the best performance in London, not the best magic act. You are the best performer in London right now. You can do whatever you want, and people will eat it up, because you are maybe the best performer in the world right now. And it's hubris that drives Angier, and he doesn't, and it totally bites him in the patootie. I don't know why I said patootie there. And at this point, the timeline starts getting back and forthy, but because we're going from journal to journal. But Angier decides to go. He learns from Borden, or he thinks he learns from Borden, the secret to his trick, and that has something to do with Tesla and electricity or something out in the West. And he goes to Colorado Springs to get a version of this trick, and
This is basically the definition of a wild goose chase.
I don't even know. I don't know how Borden even came up with Tesla.
I don't either. I mean, we saw him at Tesla's exhibition or whatever at that fair. I think he was just looking for something to disguise how simple the trick was.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, big sparky electricity, that will definitely distract people from the fact that it's just my twin brother. So he like bought a useless piece of electronic something.
Yeah, so he does go. So Angier goes off on this wild goose chase, not seeing what Cutter saw. Just he is so wrapped up in his obsession, and Tesla actually makes him this thing. I don't know how he made it, but
I like to believe that in the mythology of this movie, magic is real. And every so often, people find it. Because, like, later when Angiers demonstrates it for the guy who owns the venue, and the guy turns, after seeing the trick, to him and says, "It's been a long time since I've seen real magic." And he even tells him, like, you need to make this look more plausible.
Right.
Like he understands that he's witnessing a phenomenon.
Yeah, and I mean that's maybe it was Angier's will that made this machine work, but he doesn't get exactly what he's looking for, right? We don't know for sure that until the end, but what Tesla has made is basically a matter duplicator, or whatever. He's been trying to transport Angier's hat. And he has been. It's just that it's making duplicates of it somewhere outside of his facility.
Just like throwing them out in a field somewhere.
And that's the opening shot of the movie, is the camera just like panning across a whole bunch of
top hats,
silk hats,
which is really confusing if you're watching this for the first time. You're like,
right,
what?
The very first scene is this slow pan of top hats, and then you hear Christian Bale say, "Are you watching closely?" And if you can keep that thought in your head for the whole 2 hours and 20 minutes of this movie, you probably would be able to put together what's happening.
And as they get closer and closer to the various reveals, it gets a little bit like you start to like think of these things. But I mean, the first time I watched it, it was too much. I could not think that fast.
Right, exactly. I mean, and Andy Serkis sort of plays it off like, oh, we didn't even realize what was happening. I just didn't have it calibrated correctly. So, you're like, oh, well, they're going to fix it so it doesn't duplicate things, or I don't know, whatever. And they also put it in like the coolest box. The box that it rolls around in.
This big, like, gothic looking piece of furniture.
Oh, it's awesome. I love it.
Big cabinet.
Yeah. So this is the Great Danton. That's Angier's stage name. This is his big last chance. And, they set up in London, and it's 100 shows exclusive, and they're obviously going to charge a lot of money for it. And Borden, well, first of all, he's lost Olivia. Sarah has hung herself because she can't deal with
do you think Sarah figured it out?
Yes.
Okay. I think she did too, and I think she was prepared to tell Olivia.
That's exactly what I think. Because, like, what would she have told Olivia but,
You're sleeping with my husband.
Olivia was like, "You're sleeping," right? And that's obvious. It's like, why would she do that? I think that she totally knew.
Okay.
She eventually came to understand that. There were some. I didn't take notes on this, but there was some specific thing that Sarah said that I'm like, don't you?
One of the small hints that's buried in just all the dialogue in the movie is that Sarah tells Borden from time to time that sometimes he means it when he says I love you, and sometimes he doesn't, and that's because one of them does and one of them doesn't.
Exactly. And that's one of those things that once you have that piece of knowledge and you watch it again, like, all of the scenes are different. So, like, when
you can start to tell each scene which one is Alfred and which one is Freddy.
Right, like one time, toward the end before Sarah commits suicide, it's Alfred, and he's trying to comfort Sarah, and she's, upset, and she's drinking, and then he has this great little moment with his daughter. He's like, she says, like, are we going to go to the zoo? And he's like, no, I have some errands to run. She's like, well, you promised. And he's like, oh, I did. Well, we'll go to the zoo. I'll just run these errands first, and then we'll go to the zoo. And then he speaks with Fallon, who we then later know is his brother, and he says what it sounds like is him saying to his trusted friend and confidant, like, talk to Sarah, let her know that I love her, and be kind to her and whatever. But he's really telling Freddie, like, hey, can you not be a dick around my wife, our wife? Like, please, she's really upset right now. Can you just pretend to be nice and pretend like you love her a little bit more than you have in the past?
And thankfully, Freddie does actually seem to care about their daughter, which
yes.
I guess is probably not his, but again, who knows? He definitely does care for her, because later, when obviously he's the one in jail, he's really torn about the fact that he's never going to see her again.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. Well, this is Angier's big moment, his big, what he thinks is reading into Borden's mind. I think we learned before, we learned that he planned this before we actually see the execution of it. Borden's reading the diary, and, he comes to the end of it, and it's Angier saying, like, yes, Borden, I know that you're reading my diary, and I know that you're sitting in jail waiting to die, for my murder, because I planned it.
It's all been worked out.
Because I'm so smart. Well, yeah, Angier does frame Borden for murder. And so I got the impression at the end when Angier is, talking about, he's dying. And he's talking for real this time. Well, I guess it was real every time, but talking about his experience to Borden. I get the impression that he was going to do these 100 things, and he had it set up and planned that if Borden tried to do anything, he would get framed for murder, basically. Mm-hmm. But that if Borden never showed up, that he would just do these 100 things and then he would be fine. Like, he wouldn't go out of his way to try and get Borden to do anything.
Okay, yeah. I think the 100 shows was the lure that got Borden to go.
Yeah.
Which is why he made it a limited engagement. He's like, if he shows up during these 100, he shows up.
Yeah, so it's a lure set for Borden. He goes down to the stage, under the stage, and he sees how So he doesn't see how the trick actually works, because
it worked different that time.
Yeah, because Angier doesn't reveal himself at the end of it.
Right. There is no prestige.
There's no prestige for that trick. There's just the turn, and the turn is Angier falling into a big tank. That Cutter at the beginning said, like, yeah, it was one of the opening tricks, and it just happens to be down there because, it was one of the tricks that was part of the show. And, Borden watches as Angier drowns and
tries to free him.
Yeah, he tries, but then he dies, and now he's on the hook for killing a dude. And then I think the next scene is Lord Cudlow, whatever.
Caldlow.
Yeah. Him showing up with Borden's daughter, and it's Angier. And you're like, what? You're killing me here, movie.
Like, we just figured out the twin brother thing. Are we dealing with two twin brothers?
Exactly. Like, what's happening? So at this point, it looks like he even says, Angier says, like, he's won. Like, I've won. I beat you, You're going to hang, and I've got your daughter, which is kind of weird.
That is kind of weird.
And, it's like, and I'm going, and everyone thinks Angier's dead, and, whatever. So Borden makes this implausible promise to his daughter that he'll see her again.
Yeah, soon.
Yeah. We don't know the brother thing yet. We're like close to figuring that out.
They're actually the best hint that, if you still haven't figured it out, the biggest hint about it is after he goes to the theater and sees the trick for the first time. we get a scene in his workshop of him talking to someone, probably Fallon, about like, just leave it alone, drop it, we're done trying to figure this out. It's just let him have it. He can have his bloody trick. And that's obviously Alfred. Yes. And then in the very next scene, there's not even a scene to break them up, he's going to the theater. And that is the biggest reveal that if you're actually thinking, you can be like, what the? That doesn't make any sense. He just said to leave it alone, and now he's going to the theater?
Right.
And that's the moment that you can finally be like, he's two different people.
Yeah. And when he comes back, he's screaming at this other person now, like, why can't you figure it out? Like, this trick, like, you've seen it. You've got, like, how do you not know? How can you not know how he does it? I have to know. So he hangs. His last words are abracadabra, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah. Send a little shiver down your spine. Because it immediately cuts to the bouncing rubber ball.
Yes. And you think like that, like that's the end, but it's not the end because, you know, it's a Christopher Nolan movie or whatever. You think that should probably be the end. But Cutter goes to see this Lord, what's his name? And is shocked to discover that it's Angier. And Angier is pretty smug and self-satisfied, like, I'm the greatest magician ever. And Cutter's kind of horrified. He's like, you involved me in a plan to kill a guy. That's really not cool. And, you know, he says something like, I came here to beg to have the machine destroyed, but I won't beg anything of you. Like, I'm not going to give you the time of day. So the final thing that happens is, you know, Angier has acquired the machine and he wants to put it back with the prestige. He calls it the prestige materials.
He means his graveyard.
Right, exactly. So they take the device there. Cutter leaves. And while he leaves, he sees someone coming toward the theater and he doesn't do anything. So I at that point, it's like, yeah, Cutter is totally cool with this. You know, like he's on Alfred's side.
Yeah.
Alfred shows up. You see this guy coming. I thought it was Fallon, but, you know, because when I first saw the movie, I thought it was Fallon because I hadn't worked out.
Right. Why? Yeah, you would still think it was Fallon.
Thought it was Fallon. Sees he gets shot. I'm like, yep, it's Fallon, like doing his thing. And then it's freaking Borden. And immediately, you know, he gets shot, and Angier just immediately goes, a brother, a twin.
He immediately knew.
Yep.
It's the only possible solution, and it's always been the only possible solution. He was just too wrapped up in it to see it.
Yeah, and this is the one kind of redeeming thing for Angier. So at this point in the movie, I'm like, I don't particularly like the two Bordens. I think that, you know, I like Alfred. Freddy's kind of a prick. But I'm on their side. Like, Angier did not have to do all of this. And that's what Borden says. It's like, well, you don't really understand true sacrifice. And like, I've lost things too. You didn't just lose your wife. It's like,
I lived half a life and was happy with it.
Yeah, I was happy with half a life, and I lost. Angier lost his wife. So did Alfred.
Yep.
And I don't know which one of them got their fingers shot off, but you know, they both had.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know which one got shot and which one had to take the chisel.
Yeah, so maybe either way, you know, it's like he's gone through some stuff, and he is a better magician than Angier. You know, Angier had to use real magic. You know, he's a better illusionist than Angier. Angier had to get David Bowie to construct a magic matter duplicator to beat a simple trick that Borden thought up. And at that point, the one redeeming thing comes from Angier. It's that Borden basically frames it like, you're just doing this to get back at me. And Angier is like, well, yeah, but it's not just that. It's the looking at the eyes of everyone in the crowd when they've seen something that they can't explain is like powerful for me. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's like, it's moving in a way that, you know, you can't really capture. and he wanted that, you know, Borden had that, and he even says, like, you know, I think that's such a telling line from Angier that, you know, he says, "Were you Fallon or were you Borden?" And Borden says, "We took turns." And it was just interesting to me that that was what Angier wanted to know. Is like, were you the one who got to get the applause, or were you the man in the box?
And he said that the actual trick was when during the routine they would switch.
Yes, that's the trick.
They would switch somewhere during the middle of the set, like wherever they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Probably just to take the risk, because that's what Alfred and Freddie were all about, the dangerous risk of the trick.
Yeah, so it's at that point, if you didn't realize what was happening, you discover that Angier had been duplicating himself and drowning himself, or his clone, over and over and over again, which is pretty twisted.
Yeah.
Pretty sick and disgusting. I mean, I think that that's one thing that's really interesting and cool about this movie. I think you're meant to be on Angier's side because he's telling most of the story.
Yeah.
He's the narrator at the very least.
He is. Would that make him the protagonist, even though he's the protagonist, even if he's not a good person? Yeah.
He's the protagonist, but he's not a very good person. And in fact, by the end of this, we know that he's like, that's not something a sane person would do.
No.
Right? I mean, also, no sane person would switch lives with his brother, like, for God knows how long they've been doing this. So they're clearly not sane people. But, you know, Borden, did he kill anybody? He didn't kill anybody in this movie. I mean, he drove Sarah to commit suicide through his lifestyle.
Not until he kills Angier.
But yeah, he kills Angier, but Angier killed his brother.
Yeah.
So I think that that's justified. Whereas, you know, Angier just thinking the possibility that Borden might have been responsible for his wife's death drove him to, he killed, I don't know, several dozen versions of himself. So the last thing that I wanted to bring up was this movie came out in, let me bring it up.
October 2006.
2006. So I saw this when I first started college. This was like first month of college or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked this movie because this is probably my second favorite Christopher Nolan movie. I think Inception is probably my favorite Christopher Nolan movie. I saw this right when I started college, and I couldn't help but think of the classic college admission essay question that, at least at my school, they used to prepare you for college admission essays. And it is, there's this classic question, I think MIT started using it in like 2001, of if there was a device that created a complete duplicate of you on Mars and then destroyed the original copy, are you that new person?
Is that you?
Yeah, is that you? And then the question further asks, let's suppose it's the matter transporter 1000, and then the question says, now there's the matter transporter 2000 that creates a copy of you on Mars and doesn't destroy the original copy. Which one of you is you?
Which is one of the questions that Angier's poses to him. Like, I never knew if I was going to be the Prestige or the Man in the Box.
Yeah. And both of these characters are in that situation of this sort of slippery question of identity. Like, who is Borden? Who is Fallon? He's got this weird constructed life.
Because it's basically one person who is two different people.
Yeah. So he has to struggle with that question. And then just as much as Angier does when he's, standing on the platform, he says, it takes courage to stand on that platform and not know. But he did it because of the applause. He did it because seeing the looks on people's faces of seeing, real magic is like a drug for him.
Yeah.
So there, yeah, I mean, there's other than Cutter, there's no real likable characters in this movie, and it's long, and it's got this really complicated plot with like sci-fi elements in it, and it takes place in a weird time period, and yet I love this movie. Like if you described this movie to me, I'd be like, there's no way that that's going to be a good movie.
I'm going to bring up The Usual Suspects again. It's one of those movies that I would just matter of fact recommend to people and be like, all you really need to know is it's about magicians. I can't tell you anything else. You should just watch it.
Yeah.
The Usual Suspects, I would be like, it's about a crime gone wrong. You should not know anything else.
Yeah, that's perfectly right. Like, how do you explain The Usual Suspects to someone?
It's the retelling of a crime from this unreliable character, and everyone's missing or dead, and there's no way to do it without just being like, and he's...
Exactly. And this too, like, I think the more I would describe this movie, so maybe we've done our entire audience a disservice. Hopefully everyone has seen this and is listening to this after they've seen it, but if you haven't seen it, you might think, like, that movie sounds kind of weird. But it's not. It's awesome.
It's so well done.
So well done.
I think my favorite aspect that I couldn't have pointed at before watching it the first time is both of their tricks are revealed pretty plainly through other means. They show at the very beginning, they show you Angier's trick, which is basically the bird getting killed in the cage.
Yes.
And then somewhere like halfway through the movie, they go to see this old man who he's this old Oriental gentleman, Chinese or something, who he produces these giant bowls of water seemingly out of the air. And his trick, which Borden figures out immediately, is that he's not an old Chinese man. He's a young, strong man who is hiding in plain sight as an old man, which actually is a real thing. Do you know about this?
No.
And in the early 20th century, there was a magician who for 19 years lived his life as an old Chinese man. He selected like an Oriental origin story because that was what people really like latched onto. They're like, oh, this has got to be real. And for 19 years, he only appeared in public as this character. And he was actually killed on stage because of a bullet catch trick gone awry, which Cutter says several times, bullet catches are dangerous. He was killed on stage, and the first words he said in English for 19 years were, "My God, I've been shot."
Oh, God.
And then he died. But someone has actually done that, right? Someone has actually lived their life as another person in order to be an illusion themselves.
I mean, if that's not obsession and insanity, I don't know what else is. So I mentioned that this is my second favorite Nolan film. We're going to watch my most favorite Nolan film next week.
When I saw The Matrix, I was 15 years old, and it was pretty clear when I saw it that was like, that's my favorite movie. Like as soon as I saw it, I was like, this is my favorite movie. And I said that for so many years. Like I when people actually ask me what my favorite movie is, that's like such a complicated question. But if I have to actually point to one, I was always like The Matrix. The Matrix.
Right. It's that movie that you watch when you're, in that transitional period of your life that just blows you away and makes you think things that you didn't think before, and it's executed so well. And it's like it's your favorite movie with quotation marks around it, right?
Yeah. And then in 2010, I was looking forward to this movie that Christopher Nolan had going. Like I'd seen the trailer and I was like, wow, that looks crazy. I don't know what he's doing, but that looks nuts. And as it ended, my wife always does this thing, which actually drives me crazy because I can never answer the question immediately. She always turns to me after the movie and goes, well, what'd you think? And I can never answer that question. But this time she turned to me and goes, what did you think? And I instantly said, I might have a new favorite movie.
It's a good tease, man. So I have similar thoughts. I think I heard about this movie in late 2008. And at this point, I had seen Memento and Insomnia and The Prestige and the Batman movies. Actually, at that point, I think it was just Batman Begins. Mm-hmm. And I saw in like Variety or something, Christopher Nolan and Nolan Brothers to write and direct a I think forever there were no details except that it was going to be a crime, like a crime heist movie set in the mind, and I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
And after you watch it, you're like, that's out. Mm-hmm,
that's a pretty good description.
So I'm really excited to do Inception. I'm really excited that it's going to be the last movie we do before I go on break. And I might just watch it after we finish recording.
I might try and watch it more than once before next week.
You should. I don't have anything else.
But
I'm done. I'm done now. Left it all on the field.